Welcome everyone. Today we are not talking about simple motivation. We are not talking about loud confidence, and we are not talking about showing off to the world. Today we are talking about something much deeper. We are talking about learning like a spy. What does it mean to act like a spy? A spy does not grow loudly, and a spy does not reveal everything to the people around them. A spy absolutely does not react emotionally. Instead, a spy observes, a spy analyzes, and a spy carefully adapts. Analyzes means to look closely at the small details of a situation to understand it deeply. A true spy improves in complete silence, and if you smoothly apply this powerful mindset to your own life, you will operate at a completely different level. Most people move through life carelessly. Carelessly means doing things quickly without thinking about the future results. They speak too soon, they reveal too much, and they react too fast. Because of this, they learn too slowly, but a strategic mind moves very differently. A strategic mind patiently studies people, studies patterns, studies weaknesses, and studies opportunities before others even realize what is happening. If you want real power, not fake power, you must learn to think quietly, observe deeply, and move intelligently. And as you watch this video, you are not only learning strategy, but you are also improving your English by listening to clear and powerful ideas. If you want to grow your mind and your English together, make sure you subscribe and stay with this channel. This brings us to Chapter 1, Observe Before You Speak. This is exactly where real intelligence begins. Most people think that confidence means speaking first, but it doesn't. Real confidence is deeply knowing when to stay silent. When you enter a busy room, what do most people do? They talk. They try very hard to impress others. They share their opinions quickly, and they argue without understanding the situation. But a spy never enters a situation loudly. A spy studies the room first. The spy silently asks, who holds influence here? Who is insecure? Insecure means feeling unsafe or not confident in yourself. Who talks the most? Who listens carefully? What is the emotional atmosphere of this room? Observation gives you information. Information gives you a strong advantage, and advantage gives you control. When you speak immediately, you accidentally reveal your knowledge level, your emotional triggers, your personal opinions, and your hidden weaknesses. But when you observe first, you safely collect. And collecting gives you beautiful clarity. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you join a brand new workplace. On the very first day, one person starts complaining loudly about the management, another person is overly friendly with absolutely everyone, another person barely speaks at all, but quietly watches everything. If you speak too early and support the wrong person, you may accidentally align yourself with negativity. Align means to connect or join yourself with someone. But if you observe quietly for a few days, you will notice patterns. You will see who gets promoted, who is trusted, and who influences decisions. Now, you can move intelligently. That is learning like a spy. Observation is not just about seeing with your eyes. It is about noticing the tiny details, tone of voice, body language, and energy shifts in a conversation. Notice who becomes defensive when they are questioned. Notice who actively avoids eye contact. These small silent details reveal far more than spoken words. Most people completely miss these signals because they are too busy talking. When you observe deeply, you understand people much faster. And when you understand people, you move smarter. Silence remarkably makes people underestimate you, and being underestimated is very powerful. When people mistakenly think you are just quiet, they confidently reveal more around you. They relax, they speak freely, and they show their real personality. And while they do this, you learn. Strategic silence is never a weakness. It is pure data collection. How can you practice this daily? You don't need a special dangerous mission. Practice this in normal life. In meetings, consciously speak last. In angry arguments, pause before responding. In social gatherings, listen carefully for 5 minutes before adding your own opinion. Notice who dominates the conversation. Notice who desperately seeks approval, and notice who becomes uncomfortable with the silence. Every situation easily becomes a classroom, and you become sharper without anyone even noticing. Think about 2 students in a class. One student always answers first, speaking quickly and confidently. The other student listens carefully to every single answer before finally speaking. By the time the second student speaks, he has already heard the mistakes, the gaps, and the ideas of everyone else. His answer becomes much stronger because it is informed. Who has more advantage, the one who speaks first, or the one who observes and then speaks with precision? Observation slowly creates precision, and precision creates deep impact. When you observe before speaking, you completely stop reacting blindly. You start responding strategically, and that single habit can change your entire life. Why? Because the person who truly understands the environment always has more power than the person who reacts emotionally inside it. Now we step into Chapter 2, Gather Information Quietly. If observation is the sharp eyes of a spy, then information is the weapon. But here is the most important rule. A spy never announces what they are learning. Most people unfortunately learn loudly. They announce to the world, "I'm researching this, I'm planning something, I'm going to do this." But when you speak too soon, you instantly lose your advantage. Because once others know your secret plan, they can easily interfere, compete, criticize, discourage, or loudly copy you. A spy gathers their information silently. They patiently collect facts, they study patterns, and they connect the dots. They do this so perfectly that no one even realizes they are preparing. When you gather information quietly, you carefully avoid unnecessary opinions, you avoid negative energy, and you avoid distraction. You create pure clarity before taking any action. And clarity is a very rare thing. Most people foolishly act before understanding, which is exactly why they fail repeatedly. But when you understand a situation deeply before moving, your decisions become beautifully precise. Information is not just collecting cold facts. It is understanding people's hidden motivations, understanding complex systems, understanding rules, understanding weaknesses, and understanding timing. For example, before starting a new business, most people jump right in because they simply feel excited. But someone who gathers information quietly will step back and study. They will ask, who is already succeeding? Why are they succeeding? Why are they customers dissatisfied? What mistakes do beginners usually make? What skills are truly required? By the time they finally act, they are not blindly guessing. They are completely prepared. Imagine a young man who strongly wants to get promoted in his company. Most normal employees just work hard and quietly hope to be noticed. But this man decides to deeply learn like a spy. Instead of talking endlessly about his ambition, he observes. He notices who the boss actually trusts. He studies what kind of communication style the boss truly respects, what projects get recognition, and what mistakes cause criticism. He carefully studies past promotions, he studies the company culture, and he studies exactly how the meetings are run. For many long months, he gathers this information quietly. Then, he adjusts his behavior strategically. He communicates in a way that perfectly aligns with leadership expectations. He takes on specific tasks that bring him visibility, and he wisely avoids behaviors that hurt his reputation. When promotion time finally comes, to everyone else, it looks like simple luck. But it was not luck. It was silent preparation. While others bitterly complained about favoritism, he studied the entire system. That is the brilliant difference. The hardest part of gathering information quietly is successfully controlling your own ego. Ego is your feeling of self-importance. You will badly want to tell people, I know this, I discovered this, I'm planning something big. But you must remember that silence multiplies power. When you enthusiastically speak too early, you release the pressure. When you stay firmly silent, you build the pressure. And pressure creates massive impact. Remember this lesson deeply. Talk is just relief, but silence is leverage. Leverage means an advantage that gives you power over a situation. When you gather information quietly, you successfully move from emotional reaction to strategic action. And that simple shift changes everything. Now that we know how to observe and gather information quietly, we must talk about protecting your mind. This brings us to Chapter 3, Control Emotions. A spy without emotional control is dangerous, not to other people, but to himself. Why? Because emotions instantly reveal your position. When you react emotionally to a situation, you accidentally expose your fears, your hidden triggers, your deep insecurities, and your weaknesses. Expose means to show something that was meant to be hidden, and once your weaknesses are exposed, you can easily be manipulated. Manipulated means that someone cleverly controls you and forces you to do exactly what they want. Most normal people deeply believe that power means dominance. They think power is being loud, aggressive, and scary. It doesn't. Real power actually means stability. Stability is the strength to stay completely calm and balanced, no matter what happens around you. Think about this carefully. If someone insults you and you explode with anger, they now control you. If someone highly criticizes you and you become quickly defensive, they now control you. If someone tries to provoke you and you completely lose your focus, they now control you. To provoke means to do something on purpose to make you angry. Emotional control simply means that no one can move you without your clear permission. Reaction often feels strong, but it is actually a terrible weakness, because reaction is automatic. Response, however, is deeply strategic. A true spy never reacts automatically. Instead, they pause. They carefully analyze the situation. They silently ask themselves, is this worth my valuable energy? Is this just a simple distraction? What is the bigger goal here? If something does not strictly serve the main mission, it simply does not deserve your emotion. Let's imagine a practical example. Imagine a professional athlete during a massive, important championship game. The angry opponent tries very hard to provoke him. They trash talk, they insult him, and they try their best to trigger his anger. If the athlete reacts emotionally, he immediately loses his focus. Because he loses focus, he makes silly mistakes. And because of those mistakes, he gets penalties from the referee. But what happens if he chooses a different path? If he remains completely calm, the loud opponent becomes incredibly frustrated. The opponent violently wastes all their energy trying to disturb him. Meanwhile, the calm, quiet athlete stays completely focused on the game. In the end, he wins, not just because of his physical skill, but because of his powerful emotional control. In normal life, it is exactly the same. If someone harshly criticizes your work, you can react emotionally and fight or argue. Or you can choose to pause, listen carefully, and quietly analyze. If the criticism actually has real value, you adjust your work if necessary and peacefully continue forward. One path heavily drains your energy. The other path beautifully builds your strength. This kind of control is not natural for human beings. It must be trained. You slowly train it by pausing before responding. You train it by breathing deeply when you feel angry, by purposely delaying your reactions, and by choosing long-term goals over short-term satisfaction. Each time you proudly choose calm over an angry reaction, you strengthen your mind. And the stronger your mind becomes, the harder you are to manipulate. Remember this lesson clearly. If someone can easily control your emotions, they completely control your direction. But if you successfully control your emotions, you permanently control your future. Now that you have learned to observe quietly and control your internal emotions, you are ready for the next step. This brings us to Chapter 4. Adapt to any environment. A spy survives in a dangerous world not because he is the strongest person. He successfully survives strictly because he adapts. To adapt means to cleverly change your behavior to fit perfectly into a new situation. Most normal people carelessly try to force the new environment to magically match their own personality. If the room is very serious, they stubbornly still joke. If the room is highly competitive, they quickly become deeply insecure. When the environment suddenly changes, they simply panic and fear. But a strategic mind gracefully studies the environment first, and only then thoughtfully adjusts. Adaptation is absolutely not fake behavior. It is highly intelligent behavior. It carefully means understanding the hidden rules of the room, understanding the invisible emotional temperature, and deeply understanding what specifically works here and what strictly does not. Let's think about this powerful metaphor carefully. Rigid people break terribly under heavy pressure, while flexible people easily rise. Rigid means completely stiff and unable to bend or change. Think about nature. Water peacefully takes the exact shape of the container it is poured into. It does not angrily argue with the container, it simply adjusts. And strictly because it naturally adjusts, it smoothly flows anywhere. But a heavy rock does not adjust at all. And when a massive force violently hits it, it inevitably cracks and breaks into pieces. Most ordinary people sadly behave exactly like stiff rocks. They proudly say, "This is just who I am." But a spy deeply understands something much deeper. Your core values firmly stay the exact same, but your external behavior adapts strategically. If you are working in a formal setting, you respectfully speak formally. If you are relaxing in a creative space, you gently loosen your tone. If you are competing in a tough environment, you fiercely sharpen your focus. This beautiful flexibility is never a weakness. This is complete mastery. Mastery means having absolute, perfect control over a highly difficult skill. To beautifully adapt well, you must carefully notice how people communicate. Notice what specific behavior is generously rewarded and what behavior is quickly rejected. You must closely watch how authority functions and deeply understand how big decisions are made. Without careful observation, your adaptation merely becomes blind guessing. With deep observation, adaptation instantly becomes pure precision. That is exactly why Chapter 1 and Chapter 4 powerfully connect with each other. First, you quietly observe, and then you flawlessly adapt. Imagine a young professional who quickly moves from a very small company to a massive, large corporate organization. In his old familiar job, everything was highly informal. He could happily joke with his managers, and he could confidently speak casually in daily meetings. But in the strict new company, the professional culture is completely different. The meetings are highly structured, the communication is incredibly precise, and the hierarchy deeply matters. Hierarchy is a strict system where people are placed in different levels of power and authority. If he carelessly behaves the exact same way as he did before, he will definitely appear immature and unprofessional. But wisely, instead of resisting the cold new environment, he quietly studies it. He carefully notices exactly how the senior leaders formally speak. He closely observes how professional emails are properly written, and he intently watches how the meetings are strictly conducted. Within a few short weeks, he successfully adjusts his tone. He becomes much more carefully structured. He purposely speaks slightly less, but much more clearly. He deeply prepares himself before entering meetings. Now, he perfectly fits the environment. He absolutely did not change who he fundamentally is. He only changed how he effectively operates. That is true adaptation, and true adaptation safely protects your future growth. Some worried people completely fear adapting because they mistakenly think it firmly means losing their true identity. It absolutely does not. You can proudly keep your strong values while brilliantly adjusting your outward strategy. The spy does not carelessly forget who he is. He simply understands deeply exactly where he currently is. And the wise person who completely understands their context always moves smarter than the foolish person who ignores it. Adaptability is basic survival. Adaptability is high intelligence. Adaptability is ultimate long-term power. Now that you have learned to beautifully adapt to your surroundings, it is time to focus on how you build your skills. This brings us to Chapter 5, Train Daily in Silence. Most normal people absolutely love visible effort. They proudly announce their goals. They constantly post their plans on the internet, and they talk loudly about their big ambitions. But a true spy trains in complete silence. There is no loud applause. There is no validation. And there is absolutely no attention. Validation is a very important word. It means desperately needing other people to tell you that you are good or that you are doing the right thing. Because real, deep skill simply does not need noise. When you eagerly train loudly, you constantly seek external approval. But when you train silently, you beautifully build internal discipline. And internal discipline is always much stronger. Why is silence so effective? Silence completely removes distraction. Think about it carefully. When no one is watching you, your lazy excuses completely disappear. When no one is praising you, your ego naturally stays very small. When no one expects anything from you, you can completely focus purely on your own improvement. There is something else incredibly powerful about silent growth. It creates pure surprise. If everyone knows exactly what you are preparing, they are ready for you. But if you bravely grow quietly, your amazing results speak suddenly. And sudden, undeniable growth completely shocks people. More importantly, silent training firmly builds resilience. Resilience is the mental toughness to keep going and recover quickly when things get very difficult or painful. Because when nobody claps for you, You must bravely clap for yourself. That builds true mental strength. What does silent training actually look like in real life? It means practicing your skills without proudly announcing them to the world, improving your weaknesses completely privately, studying hard when others are just relaxing, and working quietly when others are angrily complaining. It means wisely choosing progress over cheap attention. Most people constantly chase recognition, but very few truly chase mastery. Spies always chase mastery. Let's imagine a student nervously preparing for a very competitive exam. Most students constantly talk about how incredibly hard they are studying. They loudly discuss their strategies, they constantly complain about the difficulty, and they nervously compare their progress with everyone else. But one single student does something very different. He absolutely does not talk about his preparation. He studies consistently every single day. He reviews his mistakes daily, and he strengthens his weak subjects completely privately. He strictly practices under timed conditions to prepare his mind. When the final results are proudly announced, people are totally surprised. They look at him and ask, how did he do so perfectly well? But there was absolutely no miracle. There was only silent training. While others were foolishly performing their preparation publicly, he was deeply building his capability privately. That is the massive difference. Training in complete silence strongly teaches you to boldly rely on yourself, to perfectly focus without validation, to bravely tolerate loneliness, and to stay highly disciplined completely without praise. That is a very rare strength in today's loud world. Most people weakly need constant feedback from others, but a spy is completely comfortable being alone, because alone is exactly where refinement happens. Refinement is the slow, careful process of making something purer, sharper, and much better. Remember this lesson clearly. Noise simply creates cheap attention, but silence creates real power. The loud world only sees the final results. The world rarely sees the quiet, painful preparation. But preparation is everything. Now that you have learned the immense power of training in silence, we must talk about how you present yourself to the outside world. This brings us to Chapter 6, the cover identity. When you hear the word cover identity, you might think of movies. But in real life, a cover identity absolutely does not mean lying, and it does not mean being fake. It simply means deeply understanding that not everyone deserves full access to you. Access is the special right to enter a place or to know someone's deepest secrets. A true spy never reveals their full capability. They do this not because they are weak, but because public exposure naturally reduces their strategic advantage. In normal life, many ordinary people carelessly reveal absolutely everything. They loudly share their future plans, their big ambitions, their fragile emotions, their business strategies, and their hidden weaknesses. And then, they sit and wonder why they are painfully attacked, harshly judged, illegally copied, or completely sabotaged. Sabotaged is a strong word. It means someone secretly and purposely destroys your work or your plans. You must always remember that information is power, and when you freely reveal all your private information, you foolishly give away your leverage. When people know exactly what your next move is, they can easily prepare against you. When people clearly know your weakness, they exploit it. To exploit means to use something selfishly and unfairly for your own advantage. When people know your emotional triggers, they purposely press them. Having a cover identity smoothly means you are the one who decides exactly what to reveal. You decide what to carefully protect, and you strictly decide what to keep internal. This powerful concept is called controlled transparency. Transparency means being open and easy to see through, like clear glass. But this is not secrecy born from fear. It is pure discretion born from intelligence. Discretion is the wise ability to be very careful about what you say and what you do. When others cannot fully read your mind, you naturally create a feeling of uncertainty. Uncertainty slowly creates caution, and caution deeply creates respect. People behave very differently around someone they cannot easily predict. That calm unpredictability creates quiet, undeniable authority. But if you constantly overshare your life, you become too easy to understand, easy to label, and incredibly easy to manipulate. A strategic spy is never emotionally naked in front of strangers. He observes the room first, he tests trust very slowly, and he reveals himself strategically. Selective expression is a highly valuable skill. It means you do not have to respond to every single insult. You do not share every personal dream. You do not explain every difficult decision. And you absolutely do not defend against every criticism. Sometimes absolute silence and pure neutrality protect you much more than any emotional explanation or reaction. The loud world does not need constant access to your internal world. That is your protected, private territory. Let's imagine a young, excited entrepreneur starting a brand new venture. He has a brilliant, innovative idea. Because he is so excited, he carelessly shares the full concept with many casual acquaintances. Some people respond negatively, and some people even laugh at him. Worse, one person silently copies the entire idea and launches it faster than him. Now the young man feels deeply betrayed and broken. But imagine a completely different, strategic approach. Instead of loudly announcing the full vision, he only shares small, neutral pieces of information. He builds his business quietly, and he strongly protects his core strategy. He only tests his ideas with a very limited circle of trusted people. When he finally launches to the world, his project is beautifully complete, strictly protected, and perfectly refined. No one could interfere with his success simply because no one had full access to his mind. That is the cover identity in beautiful action. It is not cold deception. It is necessary protection. This chapter is absolutely not about lonely isolation. It is about controlled access. Trust people slowly, reveal yourself gradually, and protect your dreams strategically. You simply do not owe the world your full blueprint. True strength is not found in loud exposure. Real strength is found in controlled visibility. Now we reach a crucial step that happens after the action is done. This brings us to Chapter 7, Debriefing and the Art of Self-Analysis. After every single mission, a true spy always debriefs. Debriefing is a military word. It means carefully reviewing exactly what happened during an event to learn from it. He absolutely does not celebrate blindly when he wins. He also does not blame others emotionally when he loses. Instead, he quietly analyzes what perfectly worked, what terribly failed, what was completely predictable, what was beautifully unexpected, and what can heavily improve for the next time. Most normal people completely skip this vital step. They carelessly move from action directly to distraction. Because they never took the quiet time to study their actions, they sadly repeat the exact same mistakes. Debriefing powerfully turns raw experience into pure intelligence. Without deep reflection, your hard experience is completely wasted. Reflection is the quiet, serious act of thinking deeply about your past actions. Think about it carefully. When you fail at something and do not analyze it, you only feel sharp emotional pain. But when you fail and carefully analyze it, you magically gain new strategy. On the other hand, when you succeed and do not analyze it, you just feel lucky. But when you succeed and analyze exactly why, you successfully build repeatable systems. Debriefing brilliantly converts messy human emotion into cold, hard data, and that data directly improves your performance. Heavy regret simply says, "I am stupid." But a calm review wisely asks, what specific pattern caused this mistake? Regret is a sad, heavy feeling about something you did wrong in the past. Regret cruelly attacks your core identity, but an honest review beautifully improves your future behavior. Strategic spies never violently attack themselves emotionally. Instead, they detach. To detach means to completely separate your personal feelings from the situation. They quietly observe their own past actions exactly like an outsider watching a movie. They strictly study their own performance calmly. That powerful emotional detachment is exactly what creates massive growth. True reflection means asking yourself structured, difficult questions. You must sit quietly and ask, what was my real goal? Did I thoroughly prepare properly? Where exactly did I hesitate? Where did my wild emotion interfere with my logic? What specific skill gap clearly appeared? And most importantly, what exactly will I change next time? This quiet process is deeply honest, but it is never self-destructive. It is highly objective, not dramatic. Objective means based entirely on real facts, not influenced by personal feelings or drama. Many ordinary people actively avoid this quiet reflection simply because it is highly uncomfortable. But remember this deep truth. Discomfort is often just massive growth hiding in disguise. Most people unfortunately stay average for their entire lives because they blindly repeat their days without reflecting. They eagerly act, they quickly move on, and they never actually study their own life patterns. But a spy studies absolutely everything, crucially including himself. When you beautifully become both the active player and the quiet analyst, you incredibly accelerate your growth. Honest debriefing slowly builds self-awareness. Self-awareness directly builds necessary correction, and correction ultimately builds true mastery. Now that we know how to reflect calmly on our past actions, we must face the most difficult part of ourselves. This brings us to Chapter 8. Study weakness like intelligence data. Most normal people are deeply afraid of their own weaknesses. Because they are afraid, they try to hide them. They completely deny them, and they feel deeply ashamed of them. But a strategic spy does the exact opposite. A spy treats his own weakness exactly like raw intelligence data. Data simply means cold, hard facts. Data is absolutely not emotional, and data is certainly not embarrassing. Data is just highly useful. When something goes terribly wrong, the spy absolutely does not cry and say, "I am a failure." Instead, he calmly looks at the situation and says, "There is a flaw in the system. Where is it?" Oh, flaw is a hidden mistake or a weak point in a plan. This simple shift in thinking completely changes everything. Here is exactly where most ordinary people collapse in life. They foolishly confuse their performance with their core identity. Identity is who you deeply are as a human being, while performance is just how well you did a specific task. If they fail at something, they sadly say, "I am bad at this." If they struggle, they tell themselves, "I am not talented." But a true strategic mind beautifully separates identity from performance. Performance can always improve with hard work, but your true identity remains safe and stable. If you treat your weakness emotionally, it becomes incredibly heavy and painful. But if you treat your weakness analytically, it gently becomes manageable. And manageable problems can always be solved. A spy never panics when a mission fails. Instead of crying, he patiently investigates. He asks, what basic assumption was wrong? What vital information was missing? What specific skill was underdeveloped? What necessary preparation was incomplete? Answering these questions creates massive improvement instead of deep insecurity. Most people actively avoid their weak areas and focus only on their natural strengths. But avoiding your weakness directly creates blind spots, and blind spots are highly dangerous. A blind spot is a dangerous area that you cannot see or a terrible weakness that you refuse to accept. Studying your weakness safely closes those dangerous blind spots. To study your own weakness, you deeply need maturity. Maturity is the calm, grown-up ability to handle difficult situations without crying or acting like a child. You must be able to look at yourself completely without ego. No loud drama, no self-hate, no lazy excuses, just pure clarity. For example, if you deeply struggle with communication, do not angrily say, "People just don't understand me." Instead, wisely ask yourself, is my message actually clear? Do I speak too fast? Do I listen enough? Do I effectively organize my thoughts properly? That is true intelligence. Weakness is absolutely not an enemy. It is simply information waiting to be decoded. To decode means to translate a secret message so you can finally understand it. Imagine a young, hard-working athlete who consistently loses in the final round of his big competitions. Instead of sadly saying, "I am just unlucky," he strictly records his matches. He quietly studies his own performance and he finally notices something highly specific. In the stressful final rounds, he becomes very impatient and rushes his decisions. His breathing suddenly becomes irregular, and his body movements become much less controlled. Now he has powerful data. He intentionally trains specifically for high-pressure situations. He practices deep breathing techniques. He safely simulates final round stress during his quiet training. Next season, he proudly performs completely differently. He wins, not because he became magically stronger overnight, but strictly because he studied his weakness exactly like intelligence data, and that brilliant choice changed the entire outcome. If you smoothly apply this powerful principle in your own life, you completely stop fearing mistakes. You stop hiding your embarrassing flaws. You completely stop repeating your errors blindly. You proudly become your own best analyst. And the rare person who can study himself calmly is extremely difficult to defeat Because his personal improvement becomes completely continuous, your hidden weakness beautifully becomes a powerful tool, not a painful wound. Now that we have learned to study our own weaknesses, we must learn how to study other people in real time. This brings us to Chapter 9. Listen more than you talk. Most normal people loudly talk simply to feel important, but very few people actually listen to gain deep understanding. There is a fundamental difference between the two actions. Talking simply releases your energy, but listening beautifully gathers real power. When you talk, you accidentally reveal yourself, but when you deeply listen, you silently collect. You collect valuable information, people's true intentions, their hidden insecurities, their secret motivations, and their confusing contradictions. Contradictions are moments when someone says one thing but actually does the exact opposite. People naturally reveal far more than they actually realize when they are allowed to speak freely. But if you constantly interrupt them, or if you selfishly dominate the conversation, you completely miss these highly valuable signals. To dominate means to take complete control of a situation so that others cannot equally participate. A true spy listens not just to the spoken words, but to the subtle tone of the voice, the quiet pauses, the nervous hesitations, and the heavy emphasis. Listening gives you direct access to depth. When you purposely speak much less, people naturally project more onto you. They confidently assume things. They try very hard to fill the empty silence, and they nervously try to explain themselves much further. And the more they explain, the more you perfectly understand. But if you nervously talk constantly, you carelessly lose that massive advantage. Listening also magically slows down your emotional reaction. When you deeply focus on listening, you naturally reduce your impulsive response. Impulsive means doing something suddenly without deeply thinking about the future results. You create a beautiful thinking space, and that quiet thinking space creates a highly intelligent response. Furthermore, people strongly trust those who actually listen to them. If you patiently allow someone to speak fully without any interruption and without any cruel judgment, they feel deeply respected. Respect slowly builds strong influence. Influence quietly builds real authority. Authority strongly builds massive impact. All of this incredible power comes purely from simply listening. If you quietly gather more perspectives, you safely reduce your dangerous blind spots. Many terribly bad decisions happen strictly because someone excitedly spoke too early, without deeply understanding all the complex variables. Variables are the many different things that can easily change a situation. Listening vastly expands your context. Expanded context greatly improves your overall strategy. Imagine a stressful negotiation between two business partners. One partner completely dominates the conversation, and he speaks very aggressively. He heavily pushes his strict terms incredibly quickly, but the other partner listens carefully. He calmly asks smart questions. He peacefully lets the other person explain their position fully. He closely studies the subtle tone changes in the other man's voice. He easily notices clear hesitation when certain money numbers are mentioned. From quiet listening alone, he deeply understands the true situation. He perfectly understands exactly where flexibility exists, where deep insecurity exists, and where strong emotional attachment exists. When it is finally his turn to confidently speak, he targets precisely. He proposes clever terms perfectly aligned with those hidden concerns. The big negotiation happily ends in his favor. He won not because he spoke louder, but strictly because he listened much better. Listening requires heavy restraint. Restraint is the strong, disciplined ability to stop yourself from doing something you really want to do. Restraint deeply requires ego control. You must bravely resist the urge to interrupt. You must resist the strong urge to desperately prove yourself. You must resist the wild urge to respond immediately. That quiet restraint powerfully builds your mental strength, and mental strength securely builds your strategic advantage. The person who listens deeply always understands deeply. The person who understands deeply always moves precisely, and precision wins far more than noise ever will. We have learned how to observe, how to adapt, how to train in silence, and how to deeply listen. But none of these skills will survive without this final lesson. This brings us to Chapter 10. Control emotions before they control you. Without strong emotional control, your careful observation completely collapses, your deep listening becomes terribly biased, your smooth adaptation becomes painfully forced, and your quiet debriefing simply becomes a cruel self-attack. Emotions are incredibly powerful, but unmanaged emotions are highly dangerous. A strategic spy is absolutely not emotionless. A spy is simply emotionally disciplined. There is a massive difference between the two. Many ordinary people completely misunderstand this important concept. They mistakenly think that controlling emotions strictly means hiding your true feelings. But that is not true control. That is simply suppression. Suppression means violently pushing your feelings down and refusing to deal with them. Suppression dangerously builds up heavy pressure inside you. True control, however, beautifully builds clear clarity. Emotional control simply means you deeply feel the emotion and you honestly recognize it. Then, you choose your response consciously, instead of letting the wild emotion choose your action for you. Consciously means doing something awake, aware, and completely on purpose. Most normal people operate blindly in reaction mode. If someone harshly criticizes them, they react instantly. If someone disrespects them, they loudly explode in anger. If someone rudely ignores them, they quickly overthink the situation. Their wild emotions completely decide their physical actions. And when unpredictable emotions control your actions, your consistency completely disappears. You simply cannot be strategic if you are emotionally unstable. You cannot be sharp and intelligent if hot anger completely blinds you. You absolutely cannot think clearly if cold fear strictly controls you. A true spy deeply understands that the greatest battlefield in the world is not external. The greatest battlefield is entirely internal. One highly powerful principle in emotional control is the simple act of delay. You must never make important, life-changing decisions in peak emotion. Peak emotion. Peak means the absolute highest and most intense point of something. Do not make decisions in extreme anger, not in extreme excitement, and absolutely not in extreme fear. Because peak emotion severely narrows your thinking, and it greatly reduces your overall perspective. It is a simple psychological rule: when human emotion is high, human intelligence instantly drops. Therefore, a spy wisely delays his reaction. He patiently waits. He carefully evaluates the situation. He slowly cools his internal temperature down. And only then he acts. When you stay completely calm under heavy pressure, people always notice. When others around you panic and you remain perfectly steady, you instantly gain silent authority. Quiet calmness always signals stability, and stability always signals true strength. That deep strength naturally commands deep respect. On the other hand, emotional instability clearly signals unpredictability. Unpredictability means people never know what crazy thing you will do next, and unpredictability heavily reduces human trust. This is exactly why great leaders, master negotiators, and high performers constantly train their emotional control, because without it, all other skill is completely useless. Let's imagine a manager leading a team during a terrible crisis. A major project suddenly fails. Important deadlines are painfully missed. The clients are very angry and the entire team is highly stressed. If the manager reacts emotionally by shouting, unfairly blaming others, and panicking, the fragile team becomes even more unstable. Cold fear spreads quickly, and team confidence completely collapses. But imagine instead that the manager takes a deep breath and pauses. He listens to the broken situation fully, and he speaks very calmly. He honestly says, "We made mistakes. Let's break this down step by step." He brilliantly separates his raw emotion from his logical analysis. He firmly assigns responsibility without any aggressive anger. He focuses entirely on fixing solutions instead of pointing blame. Instantly, the terrified team stabilizes. Why does this happen? Because emotional control powerfully created clarity, and clarity beautifully created clear direction. That is true power. People without control speak cruel words they later deeply regret. A spy, however, always stops and asks, does this emotional reaction actually serve the mission? If it does not serve the mission, the emotion is simply discarded. You must remember that emotions are only temporary, but the consequences of your actions are permanent. Strategic minds always prioritize permanent consequences over temporary impulses. This is not automatic, it is hard work. It deeply requires pausing before speaking, breathing deeply before reacting, and carefully questioning your own internal story. You must constantly ask yourself, what is the absolute smartest move here? Each time you bravely choose calm logic over wild chaos, you strengthen your invisible mental muscles. Over time, remaining calm simply becomes totally natural. And when calm becomes natural, you become highly dangerous in a very good way. Because now, you cannot be manipulated easily. You cannot be provoked easily. You cannot be destabilized easily. Emotional control is not just about staying polite and calm in public. It is deeply about managing your internal narratives. Narratives are the silent stories you constantly tell yourself in your own mind. When something goes wrong, your anxious mind quickly creates negative stories. It whispers, "They don't respect me. I am not good enough. This terrible thing always happens to me." A true spy boldly challenges those dark stories. He stops and asks his own brain, "Is this a real fact? Or is this just my emotions speaking right now?" This beautiful separation completely protects your mental clarity. That clarity strictly protects your forward direction, and your direction safely protects your final progress. When you fully master emotional control, you think brilliantly clearly under heavy pressure. You carefully respond instead of blindly reacting. By doing this, you safely protect your valuable relationships. You protect your golden opportunities. You protect your good reputation, and you perfectly protect your long-term goals. Emotional control is your ultimate internal armor. Armor is the heavy metal suit a knight wears to protect his heart in a war. And remember this forever: internal armor is always vastly stronger than any external force.